Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Chris Before Coffee. Hopefully this is coming to you in good form. I am currently at Google Campus in London. This is a co-working space. Let me give you a little tour and witness all of the self-unemployed people. This is where you go when your job has been automated away by a computer or outsourced on Odesk to somebody in the Philippines doing it for a fraction of the cost. Yeah, so I talk about this place quite a lot on my shows before, so I thought I'd actually come here and do a show. If you have anything to say or any questions, please click on the Q&A down in the bottom left-hand corner of this video. But mostly I wanted to start today with the topic, which is me presenting how to start your own cryptocurrency at Lloyds Banking Group this morning. I was invited by Max Kalis, who is a friend of mine. We've been hanging out in London for a little while. He had me give a presentation to the people at Lloyds Bank. I know. Here they are, listening to somebody basically telling them that the end is nigh. This is a bunch of turkeys being told that Christmas is coming. And I would like to take you through some of the slides before sort of going into some of the questions that came up at the end, because I think there are some really important insights. So I started off just by introducing myself, giving me a little background, telling them about what Feathercoin is, and really just giving the lay of the land. I don't usually like to start with the price when talking about cryptocurrencies, but context is important here. So the reason why I started with the prices because that's the language, that's the audience that I was presenting to. I basically laid out that essentially the market capitalization of all of the alt currencies combined is only 500 million, and yet Bitcoin stands at 8 billion. Like it is a tiny market. It's not even a penny stock, it's a rusty stock. I took them through the process of how they could start their own currency based on Bitcoin. They can go to the GitHub, download it from the repository, and make various sort of parameter changes. I gave them a little insight into some of the code, but not too much to kind of scare anyone off. I conveniently started to show them the part of the code that deals with double spending. And then I kind of showed them the software as a service services that are available, like in CoinGen, that they could, right now just create LloydsCoin and let the free market decide what its value should be. But then I kind of brought it back to reality, and I started to talk about the people being the most important thing around any currency, because currency means to flow. It is basically a way for people to relate and to measure their sacrifices and the things that they do. And this is particular, I like this story, I've been using it a lot. We met this chap called Ed, who works in a small market near Oxford, and he told us that 60% of his customers no longer carry cash, which means he's losing out on a lot of impulse buys. People that used to spend money with him but now have cards. And the truth is that money has been digitized now for the last sort of 20 to 30 years. And the question is, who controls that information? So I just gave them a quick romp through the last 13-14 months for me, the Amsterdam conference last year, the Bitcoin Expo, which was a massive audience. It was a huge event in London. Some of the highlighting some of the efforts from the community that we have in the UK. This is Ryan. He makes the physical Feathercoin memorabilia. It's essentially a pop-up economy. This is Hank, who made the Feathercoin Android wallet. I met in Washington, DC. I told them all about my crowdfunding campaign and how people came together on Twitter to help me be there and meet people. And this idea that anyone can create their own currency now, that you can do this in 20 minutes to an hour. And really the value of the currency is a function of your ability to persuade other people that it's worth something. That essentially the principal difference between a cryptocurrency and a government-backed currency is that the cryptocurrencies are full asset-backed. They are not debt-based currencies. They are not fractional reserve. There are no gaps on the blockchain. Every single coin that is issued is backed against the energy and time of the miner who witnessed the payments and stamped them in. And so I kind of, gave an insight about this sort of idea that really we didn't consider Feathercoin to be a global currency first. We really considered it a local currency that had global potential, and that we have lots of people from all over the world who come together around the forum. I gave a kind of insight into how we used to organize things when we used to do things through do.com. Sadly, do.com, which is basically a management software, particularly for small teams to offer up tasks, and then any individual within the organization can take ownership of each task. And over time, it allows for reputations to emerge where the people that deliver are the people that tend to be surfaced. We can see who the doers are because you're able to build a reputation based on the things that you're doing. I took them through a quick history of where we'd come from, starting at the Oxford Blue. We had the film crew there. We had a very, very popular video that got something like 38,000 views now on YouTube. It's been very successful. Chris Leyland and Ollie Newport made it. It was very, very well made. And to show them that this is essentially a lot of their business activities lies here. It lies in amateur enthusiasts switching their GPUs, pointing them at an IP address essentially, and mining the coin. And then really the kicker for me, and what I was hoping to really get across, is this project that Rob has been working on. And what this is an open source point of sale that one of our users, Uncle Muddy is his nickname on the forum, has been working on, and really just showing them that all of this is open source, right? So you publish the IP first, and you basically are able to raise money based on inspiration. You're not holding a gun to someone's head, right? When you open source something, what you're saying is, I give up the need for control. This is a spare time project, something that I do when I don't have, when I have a lot of time on my hands. Particularly what we're seeing on these forums are people that have surplus capital. They have maybe well-paying job, good paying jobs, or have been very frugal in the past with their spending habits, and are therefore able to spare some extra time. And so Uncle Muddy has been working very hard also on the Feathercoin ATM, all the circuit boards. This is with a Raspberry Pi that's powering this. All the code, apparently it's like 500 lines of Python that actually makes this thing work. So this could be really, really big, because basically it means that any merchant now will be able to produce their own point of sale device. They won't have to buy it off an intermediary, and if they want to, they can even process their own payments by running a miner and actually supporting the strength of the network. And just talking about the fact that it's not about marketing anymore. It's really about community, and communities form around a common need. Communities come together when people agree on something that they're lacking, that they want. So my kind of final thought for the session, and the talk lasted about 20 minutes, and I have about 10-15 minutes of Q&A, was really this idea of LloydsCoin. This is something that we did last night on Twitter. I actually got a few of the usual suspects, Philippe and so on, to, let's see if I can find some here, to actually submit some ideas. Yeah, here we go. So, nowadays all I have to do is say, hey guys, make a poster, let's do a crowdsourcing campaign, and then lots of people start sending in their suggestions. So that was really cool. Yeah, and then we just kind of ended up on a general kind of Q&A round, and what I found was, look, when I won't lie, when I proposed the LloydsCoin idea, it kind of was, just a stunned silence in the audience. And I'm not entirely sure, like I could read their minds. What they were thinking was, how am I going to get this past the boss? How many people need to sign off on this policy? Like, we've got to, research things. Essentially, these corporate structures, the whole underlying philosophy is that you avoid catastrophe at all costs, right? You don't take any risks. And the problem is, as I've said before, risk is a distributed phenomena, and you have to move very, very quickly. The problem I think a lot of these large banks and corporations have is they've got very rigid decision-making processes and governance structures. They've also got a broken recruitment model where you're basically recruiting people with specialized subjects that aren't polymathic, they aren't generalized in their field of knowledge, they aren't able to move quickly, they over-invested on their education, learned too much about one particular subject, and therefore aren't able to move as nimbly around the environment. They aren't open to new ideas. A lot of what makes Bitcoin hard to understand for someone who's new coming from the outside is that you have to overturn old knowledge. So partly it's an attitudinal shift. You've actually got to change what you thought was true from before, and also you've got to have a little bit of knowledge about a broad range of subjects to really understand it. So after I finished, I was approached by a handful of people. Most people were just kind of like walking off in a daze. I think I tend to talk very quickly. I tend to be quite intense. I think I maybe overwhelmed a few people, but I did have a few people come up to me, and one of the first questions I got was just this brilliant non sequitur, right? He basically says, but Chris, if all of these currencies in the world are debt backed, why would anyone actually want to buy an asset backed currency? Because I'd put so much effort into talking about the incentive structure. And I'm thinking, well, that question's kind of back to front. I mean, do you not understand that this debt backed currency system has to fail? Because no debt goes unpaid, ultimately. Like, you're not going to just be able to keep putting debt upon debt upon debt, typing numbers into a spreadsheet, calling them valuable. I even quoted Obama. I got it from Christoph Atlas's talk. I quoted Obama and I said, look, government is essentially a monopoly on violence. Essentially, you are saying, okay, we all accept that some criminality has to exist in society, so we'll set up this thing called a government and just let it exist over here for a while. Now, after that, the conversation kind of opened up a bit. A chap called Michael came up to me and he was saying, well, where do you see retail banking in the next 20 years? Try 5 years, maybe try 2 years. The question for me is, like, what value do these institutions really bring? I don't understand. Like, why would I keep my wealth with you? Like, you're no good to me as a savings vehicle, right? I'm not going to spend my hard-earned cash with you, because how are you giving me a return unless you're fractional reserving? If you're fractional reserving, I don't want to bank with you at all, because really that money isn't there. It's just phantom numbers on a screen. Every time you go to an ATM, you're basically taking a chance that you may not get your money out. Now, he then asked, well, then why hasn't it collapsed already? And I think the reason is because everyone is in collective denial. In order to be in denial, you have to know what the truth is. There has to be some part of you that acknowledges the nature of reality. I think the reason why a lot of members of the public who perhaps aren't clued up on the details but have a general sense are probably not going to the ATM, because they know that if they do, that the whole thing will come down. I think everyone at the moment is up on 2 feet. Like in tennis, the two-step where you get up on 2 feet, you could go in either direction, and everyone's looking around to see what everyone else is going to do. And if I see, a small group of people heading for the cash window, I'm going to head there too, because nobody wants to be the first and nobody wants to be the last. And I think really Bitcoiners for me are some of the most forward-thinking, intelligent people that I've ever met. I mean, that's generally why I hang out in the community. It's not because of the price, it's because of the people and the way they think. And when you're going into these institutions like Lloyds Bank, I think it's important to remember that these are people too. Bankers are people too. And to some extent, I do think that the banking industry does have something to offer this industry. I know, but listen, hear me out. I still think there is a lot to be said for risk management and helping us make safer decisions about the future. It's really about taking a long-term investment and turning it into short-term rewards. The problem is that you can't earn on promises alone. That's the biggest problem that I've got with it. And so really for me, it was, yeah. Oh, damn, it's starting to rain. I might have to cut this short. I think for me, I would like to go back again. I was invited back again. A few people said that they found it really interesting. They were going to have a meeting later today about LloydsCoin. I think someone else had already suggested the idea. I mean, I was kind of suggesting it tongue-in-cheek. I wasn't really seriously suggesting that they start a cryptocurrency. But I do think it would be very interesting to let the open market decide, to see... I wonder what people would do. I really do, because you're basically staking a 300-year-old reputation on a currency. I wonder whether Lloyds Bank would actually prop up their own currency if it meant that their reputation was at stake. So I think it would be interesting. Right, it is starting to rain. I might have to actually move. I have invited Jamie Nelson to the channel, but I'm just going to field a couple of questions. So Theo, yes, monopoly on violence is the key point that needs to be questioned. Yes, it is a very good point. And it was very interesting when I first heard that. I hadn't heard it before. It was something that Christoph had told me about. And we have another question here from Tony P. Problem with bank coins, they'd have to liquidate billions of pounds of assets before they could transfer to a new currency, would they not? Well, only if they wanted to prop the price up. One of the interesting things about Bitcoin is that it's not particularly stable. So let me just move under the shelter here. The problem is that it's not necessarily a measure of anything because its price fluctuates too much, and so therefore it can't really be used as a measure of value. Now, Jamie, talk to me. Are you there? Can you hear me? Hello.
Hi,
Hi. How are you doing?
I am doing great. So you got rain. I was talking on the YouTube yesterday with Will, and I had a tornado.
You beat me. You trumped me. All I can do is rain. I'm in England. What can I say?
You were talking about the monopoly on violence. I have that video on my YouTube. I'm going to share that real quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
go ahead.
Let me see if I can. Where's my apps? Here we go. Okay, let me see. Oh, come on. Where is it? I need to get more familiar with this interface. It
Take,
confuses me
takes
every time.
takes a little while actually to get used to. So I don't know if for the viewers at home that don't know, Google Live Hangouts is on the one hand an amazing piece of technology. On the other hand, it is very, very stressful to manage these things. You've got all these settings all over the place. You've got to keep engaging the audience, keep talking, stay on topic, don't lose your train of thought. At the same time as kind of managing all the volumes and all the share screen settings. Every time I share my screen, my color settings reset on my camera, so I have to remember to go back to the settings panel, reset it. It's quite stressful running one of these things, but I do really like it. I've had some really really good feedback on the reason why I don't do recorded content. I've tried, trust me, is because I end up getting wedded to a particular script. I then can't deliver that script in one take, so I get really, really frustrated. I then have to spend hours afterwards cutting it. Because I'm a lazy perfectionist, I end up just like failing. Whereas when I go on a live stream, it's like instant, just do it. And if it fluffs, it fluffs, and all you can do is carry on.
Yeah, and I have the video here. I don't know if it's going to show it though.
Oh, do you have share screen?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Is that on the top or on the bottom?
Well, just so Jamie, just tell us what the video is. Well, I mean, what's your general point that you want to make?
It's the actual video of Obama saying essentially what a nation state is a monopoly on violence.
Right, right. I think that's
Um,
I think that's a really interesting person to have made that point.
yeah, and it shows that the politicians actually understand that, it's not like they're um, believe that they're in there for the good of mankind or whatever. They understand the reality of the situation.
Yeah, they know full well what they're doing. And I think one of the issues that I'm coming up against when I talk to lay people who are quite kind of new to this scene is they don't understand that the people at the top get their power from the people at the bottom. That power really comes from us. This is really about the way we outsource a lot of the personal responsibility that we should be taking for ourselves, no?
Yeah, and that's what I'm all about is, I don't want somebody to make rules for me or anything like that. I'm perfectly fine making my own decisions, and if I wanna, you know, I should have the choice myself if I wanna put a chemical into my body or if I wanna drink a 38-ounce soda or if I want to drink a 12-ounce soda. I mean, they made those ridiculous rules in New York City, and it's like arbitrary restrictions. And I know I've had conversations with people around the world where, like, guns are common where I live, but like where you live, they've gone as far as outlawing pointing knives.
Yeah, right. Which works fine if if as long as the status quo doesn't change, and as long as we can trust the police and the government to do the thing that they're supposed to do, what we pay them to do with our taxes. The problem I think that we've got in the UK is we're totally unprepared for civil unrest. So if the shit hits the fan and everything goes tits up, well, how am I supposed to protect myself in an environment where only the police and the criminals have the guns?
Right. And if you and I don't think the majority of people are bad. I mean, that's what a lot of people think. Oh yeah, these bad people are. If there were no laws or whatever, everybody's going to just start making chaos. Well, if you woke up tomorrow morning and the government was gone, would you go out and just start killing people and robbing people? Well, no.
No, of
I
course not.
mean, you probably wouldn't do anything different than what you do today. I mean,
Well, the problem
you're
is,
not going to instantly turn into a bad person because you don't have a president or a prime minister or something. There might be a few bad actors out there, but
well, the problem is it's going to create a power vacuum. So in that situation, when the rubber hits the road, you are going to have lots of people clamoring to take over the duties of what the government used to do, and that's the biggest threat. I agree that we're enlightened, we're much more enlightened than we have been in previous civilizations, to the point where I have a frame of reference now. I know what something like a civilized society should function. The problem is there are lots of people who have a vested interest in taking over and assuming the role of violence that the government used to occupy, and those are the people with the guns. I mean, look at all the new security procedures that are coming in at the airports now. When we go to a UK airport traveling to the US, we have to make sure that there is battery power in our electronic devices, otherwise we risk being taken off the flight and missing our flight, because you need to prove, for reasons unknown, you now need to prove that your electronic devices are working, because apparently there's a new type of bomb technology that's available. And the problem is, like Benjamin Franklin said, people that trade security for freedom don't deserve either. The problem is the terrorist always wins, because the modus operandi of the terrorist is to create uncertainty and fear. What they want to do is they want to put everything in your known world under threat. Everything could go any moment, anything could be next, and as a result you just end up curtailing all of your freedoms throughout your life and end up living a very miserable existence, even though these terrorist threats are outlier events.
and you know, in the U.S. here, it was the statistics. I mean, there were since 9/11, there's been like 13 people killed by terrorists in the United States, compared to over 5,000 people killed by police. And I mean, so we have all this new security and the militarization of the police for our security, but what's happened is the police have gotten more brutal, and it's become the police are the terrorists now.
And in fact, a point that I've been making a lot of the presentations I've been doing is that everybody should be a police officer. Everyone should be able to assume that responsibility. And you can do that when you have a public blockchain, when you've got a ledger that everyone can go to, that everyone can reference as truth. And that's what we've seen. The regulation for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies comes from the code and the community.
Yeah, and I like the open source software type movement. For it's available for everybody to view the code, and you know, even if you can't if you don't understand the code or whatever, if you trust somebody else, it's a trust-based system too, where maybe I don't understand exactly what that line of code means, but I'll ask somebody else, or I can learn what it means and verify that it's an honest piece of code or it's a dishonest piece of code. But it's there for people to see, rather than closed source, or where you can't even look at it, and you got to just trust this, graphic interface to say, oh yeah, you're going to trust that, and then you have all these spy agencies digging through your computer, and all these companies sucking out your information to serve you advertisements and doing psych profiles on you and all this other stuff. It's just kind of creepy when you think about it. I mean, somebody made a video about, when did the NSA become this creepy ex-girlfriend that wants to know everything you're doing?
I actually distrust Facebook more than I trust the NSA. NSA, at least they have protocols and regimes, and there can be whistleblowers. The problem I have is the biggest threats we face we probably don't even know about yet. And these are probably people that are working in these large companies, particularly Google recently got a banking license in Ireland, for example. These are the people that are creeping up on us very, very slowly. The thing I think that concerns me is that the stuff that went on in the NSA was well known by a lot of people for a long time. The problem was the public just hadn't responded to it. It wasn't until Snowden that really the mainstream media started to pick it up. The mainstream media had to pick it up because they feared being irrelevant if they didn't. And I think it's slowly dawning on people now that since these threats can emerge any time from any vector, that it's better just to lay the information out in the open, like you're saying, with open source, because security is a chain, and it's only as secure as its weakest link. You need many, many eyes looking at this software, inspecting the code. That software that you're running is only as secure as your ability to scrutinize the code. If you haven't scrutinized the code yourself, then it's only as secure as the person that you trust the most who's vouched for it. And even then, I'm still worried that open source still doesn't get to absolutely every attack vector that we face.
Well, yeah, and I mean, there's always going to be an unforeseen. I mean, you can't anticipate everything. There's, and you and I had a Twitter conversation or exchange the other day about that. I mean, the worst threats you have are, and anything, are unforeseen, because if you had saw this coming, you would have prepared for it. And that's what always happens. You can have, if you're running a computer server or something, you can have all these power backups and everything else, and spare hard drives and all of that. And then, if something else that you haven't prepared for happens, it's going to take down your website, for instance. Okay, you have a power backup and all of that, but you forgot to put a power backup on your router, because that's what I had thought of yesterday when I was having my thunderstorm and tornado here. It's like, okay, I'm on my laptop, so I'm not going to lose power there and everything, but if I don't have a backup power source on my router, so my internet will go down if so there, and you don't prepare for those situations until after the fact.
Yeah, well, that's why we have to take a more distributed response, because the more people that we have looking at this, like I really like this idea of BitSync, where you can distribute your storage. People can actually sell their hard drive space for bitcoins. You can fragment your data, encrypt it, and store it on other people's computers. So it needs to be spread out. At the moment, the internet is very, very centralized. There are only a few kind of high-speed backbones that really power the majority of the bandwidth, to the point where if those things fail, then we really are screwed, because so much of our existence and our modern civilization relies on these low latency, high transaction networks that we built up. I just don't know what I would do if I couldn't get on the internet anymore. I mean, my life would be altered substantially. Our whole life, I mean, actually, also this question came up after the presentation as well, on our energy dependence, that we're very, very dependent on a very small number of centralized energy supplies. And one of the people said, well, look, what happens if the electricity stops working? How's your Bitcoin going to work then? I said, well, yeah, sure, but then how does anything work? I mean, we're going to probably have bigger problems to worry about. We're probably
I'm
going to
not
end up
worried
paying.
about electricity isn't going to be a problem. I got a 3,500 watt generator in my garage.
Yeah, but
Plus,
what about the internet? Well, the telephone companies, all the infrastructure relies on it.
but if we have things like, say, Open Garden or these other mesh networking things where we can have our Wi-Fi mesh networked, and that's what I want to see building up now in things like MaidSafe or SyncBit or BitSync or whatever it was you just mentioned.
Yeah, BitSync, yeah.
I think that is something that I'm really excited about. If we can really promote those and get these mesh networks set up, it will make the telcos irrelevant for the internet. And I like the model that I just watched the MaidSafe presentation that Paige did at Bitcoin in the
In the Beltway,
Beltway,
yeah.
and I like the idea behind MaidSafe because it's an incentive-based, fragmented, encrypted sharing network where you actually earn SafeCoin or whatever for sharing out a piece of your computer resources, whether it be some CPU power or some hard drive space or whatever. You will earn, your computer sits there earning money basically for sharing that resource and bandwidth while it's on the network. And things in the past, like when Napster first started and Tor and things like that, people would just get on there and they would download the song they wanted and they wouldn't share out their stash of stuff. So there was very few people that were constantly hooked up to the network because you would see the list of songs and stuff that would be on there, and then they would, you know, okay, there's 7 people have that song now. Now there's only 3 because people would jump on there, download what they want, and then disconnect from the network because that was a greed-based network instead of a incentive-based network.
I think it's very, yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's very tempting to use hindsight bias and moralize about issues like centralization, but I've been saying for some time now that centralization is a stepping stone to that scale that we're seeking, the distributed model. It's not that it was wrong at the time, it was probably the best that we could do, but now that we've got better alternatives, now that you're heading towards an atomized society where each individual person has everything they need in order to be a server, you've no longer got this client-side, server-side model where, you know, as a client, I have to sorry about the noise here, I'm sitting on planks of wood at the moment, where you're relying on a server to distribute all of the data to you. Now my individual devices have the ability to become server nodes in themselves. I can host my own DNS server from my phone potentially. Now that's why I think what you're getting towards now are all these sealed devices and these kind of rooted devices like Apple's iPhone, where you actually have to go out of your way to get root level access to the device. That's actually one of the biggest threats, is that a lot of young people now only know how to use modern technology at the application layer. That's what concerns me, is that we aren't building enough hardware engineers. That was why I tried to show the point of sale that Rob was working on at Feathercoin, because it's really important that it's not just the software here, it's also the hardware that we have to open source and distribute as well, because all of this software relies on that hardware.
Yeah, and that's something that I wanted to get into back in the late 90s, and I ended up taking a different path just because the offer for a job in computer networking came to me before the offer in something else. Because I had kind of wanted to get into machine design and whatever because I had did some hardware design before, but it was pretty cool. And I see you need to wrap things up. Is it,
Yeah,
how's the rain
so
going?
what I want to do, I just want to wrap things up because I'm running out of battery. Actually, this thing really, I was at like 80% when I started. It's gone down so quickly because this microphone setup and the camera really runs it down. So, but Jamie, listen, these are really, really good points. And what I suggest we do is we have another show because we're also getting, just as a final point, Tony P is asking, do I think that Comcast is a big threat to the upcoming crypto? No, I don't. I maintain, as I have done all along, that the biggest threat to crypto is the mainstream public. I think that they still need to be persuaded. Most notably, they need to be persuaded that this isn't just another monster coming along to replace a preceding monster. That's what they want to know. So I think there are many challenges and debates. But listen, Jamie, thanks so much for coming and joining me on this show. It's good to know that this actually works on the public Wi-Fi here at Google Campus. So why don't we end it there for now? I just want to tell everyone about what's happening later this week in London. We've got a very kind of interesting event called Coin Summit. Ruth from Feathercoin and I went to it last year in July. It's organized by a guy called Pamir. It's a husband and wife team. I think they organized a Coin Summit in San Francisco not many months ago. It's very interesting because it seems to be fairly, I don't want to say elitist, but they've been very, very selective about who they've been giving tickets to. So even people that I would have said were very prominent members of the London Bitcoin scene, even they've been finding it difficult to get tickets. But what I am reassured by is that they are hosting a live stream. So if I think there's some interesting content coming out of this space, just take you through some of the speakers, then I might well chime in and come in with my own live stream and maybe add some commentary on this. So this looks like it's been selected for VCs and investors. This looks like it's mainly for people that have startups, maybe they've already got some traction, who are looking to meet people with capital. And I guess what Pamir is thinking is that he wants to keep the numbers very select so that, you know, you get lots and lots of, you know, people kind of playing off of each other. You always, with these events, the problem is sometimes you get too many dreamers and you don't get enough people with execution and you don't get enough people with real capital that they're willing to enter in the market. So you can follow those guys on Twitter as well. I think it's at Coin Summit. And this is the website coinsum.it. So I'm going to try and come in from there as well. I'm not going to the event. In fact, I didn't even try to get a ticket just because I've been so busy with other things. So Jamie, do you mind if I just take you off the call? What I'm going to do, I'll see you next time. What I'm going to do is just give you, if I can, a quick kind of tour of Google Campus. Let's see how this is going to work. Right, I just need to go into my camera settings. I've got 8% of battery left. Aperture priority. That should work. And then when I go inside, you should be able to see what it looks like. There's a number of these kind of, I've been told they're called incubators. An incubator, I've been told, is very different to an accelerator. An accelerator is basically a way of funding small startups with teams of less than 10 people who want to begin you know, a tech company, and you actually get funding. Whereas an incubator, anyone can join in, and essentially you get free co-working space like this, see? But what you find when you hang out in these kind of environments is that really what's going on here, most of the people in this room are social media marketing people. So they are not coding, they're not disrupting anything despite all the kind of the marketing and the rhetoric. Essentially what you're doing is you're scanning an ID card when you come in, so they get that information on you. You can then buy coffee at the bar, which of course is priced at regular market price. You're not getting any kind of discounts. So in other words, what I'm trying to say here is that it's the middlemen that really make the money. So you're doing very well if you're running one of these organizations, because there's a huge appetite at the moment to get into startups, because so many of these people have lost their jobs. A lot of these jobs were just automated away. So it's a very interesting place to hang out. I don't recommend that you do it too much, because sometimes you just kind of get addicted to the coffee and the conversation rather than actually doing any kind of productive work. But yeah, I remain skeptical. I think a lot, you know, just look at this behind me. You've got this kind of rocket thing the truth is that 99% of these startups fail. Failure is the norm. And yes, you've got a lot of people with some very lofty dreams, but unfortunately, I think mostly these startups are basically a way for people to find their tribe. They're a way to see, like, who do I like working with? Well, it didn't work out with that guy, but actually I kind of like working with this guy. But it is kind of an interesting atmosphere at the moment. And I think once the general members of the public get around to the understanding that this data needs to be controlled and be made the responsibility of everyone, rather than trying to make it proprietary and putting it inside a startup just so that it can sell to Google and Facebook, I think we'll be all the better for it. So thanks a lot for joining me. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Chris Ellis. Please send me your thoughts and feedbacks if you've got any ideas for future topics for shows. You can do what Jamie did and join me and converse and discuss things. So thanks a lot, and I will see you next time.